Hello, Dasbook. I've been thinking about your question, and my immediate reaction is that this is exactly the sort of thing, this sort of question that becomes meaningless the more you analyze it. In the end, it becomes an unanswerable question with an objective viewpoint. Because see, you get into it later in your video about what are the properties of a fine mind, for example. Is that even answerable? As always, the key question after a certain point. This is way out in the teeny tiny decimal points now. We deal with it every day, but it's just like an engine, a jet engine. I mean, you can go look at it, touch it, listen to it run, all sorts of things, not all at once. But, to actually make one requires a kind of precision way out to some fine decimal points that most of us, don't have in us. At least not in that particular case. So this question of something like fine minds has a ring to it. It can, of course, also go elitist rather quickly. Again, in the objective framework. Now, what I'm getting at is that, you have to analyze a thing like this in a relativistic way, right? You're never going to answer what is a fine mind, though I'll go through that in a second. It's going to be a relationship. There's going to be two minds involved, and it's going to be the intellectual relationship that can be fine. Let's pretend, since we've all done it, and here we are in history at this point, obviously we're familiar with it. So let me run you through what I think is a good analysis of a fine mind. Now, what would a fine mind be? It would produce fine thoughts, which would be true thoughts. Yeah. Yes? Okay. Now we know that if you had a perfect computer and you give it bad input, it's going to come up with a bad answer. So having perfect logic or thinking process wouldn't do it, right? You could always give that mind hallucinations or incomplete information. It would make unfine decisions. So to be fine would have to mean that also the mind had a way of telling what was true. So really a fine mind is somebody that, in the subjective way, it would be somebody that knows how to tell good evidence from bad and how to reason with it. And that works pretty well, actually. Those two skills have a lot of details to them, but they're real generalizations. You can think of the problem that way. And as far as I know, you can apply that to any study for truth. But the problem is there is no one way of judging evidence, and there's no one way of reasoning. And that's where relativity comes in. When you start talking about the qualities of these fine minds as if they could be real individuals rather than just an abstraction, like they could be leaders, and what should they do in the real world, that's where objectivism doesn't have enough precision. Okay? You have to look for that mind in relationship to some other mind. Like, oh, I have an idea, let's use yourself. So a fine mind is then going to be the mind that is at the other side of a fine intellectual relationship. Let's consider it a momentary relationship, one conversation, one sentence in a conversation, right? Not the whole complex of a whole narrative story. Let's consider that a lot of elements of each individual connection, each interaction. That's what would be fine. And relativism, that's what you can get your handle on, right? It's like, to find a thing in itself is a fool's errand. But you can find out if this entity is giving that entity energy, right? That doesn't mean the giver of energy is more wealthy, has more energy. It might not be the case. Okay, like if it was a transfer of money, it might not be the case at all. The poor guy might be giving money to the rich guy. Might be how he got rich. So what's a fine relationship then? What's a relationship that you or anybody might have with another mind that's a fine relationship? And I would argue that its foundation is in honesty. Because if you're getting the honest answer, right, then there's real information. So any processing you do with it is real processing. You might get information that's almost trivial. Like you sent out the information of encoded as a question of, why does the sun rise? The information you get back is, I don't know. But that's better than an answer when the person doesn't know and is just saying and is not honest about it, because that's not real information. Bad information ensures bad conclusions when you have a good logic. You see? So it becomes very important to get good information. So I think any communication that's honest is productive. It might be more productive for one side than another, or productive in a way that, again, by a person's individual criteria, just isn't good enough or isn't even productive. It might be counterproductive. But it will affect some change, and the logic will have real information to work with. So it's not some particular kind of individual. In real life, no individuals are fine minds. Okay, but there can be this network of fine intellectual relationships. And if you're lucky enough to have a lot of them, then you'll probably be lucky enough to be thought of as a fine mind. I don't particularly want a lot of them or to be thought of that way, so just saying.